Good morning, Seoul. Good morning, TechRise 2020. In the first half of 2020, we've witnessed how fragile and exposed our global systems and structures are to a major global crisis. That's indeed the reason why I can't be with you today, being subject to quarantine rule, which I truly regret. I have very fond memories of our sessions last year at TechRise in the wonderful city of Seoul. As we come to terms with the global pandemic and look to a future, we have an opportunity, we believe, for a global reset. When we think about that, to build a better, more sustainable and a more resilient future. To speak with the words of our Chief Innovation Officer, Arnobio Morelix, he calls it the great reboot, and is actually writing a book about it as we speak. Innovation, new technologies, academic R&D are critical components in this reset, we strongly believe. And if you want to take advantage of this opportunity, you need to make sure that tech and innovation are the cornerstones of recovery from economic recession, a recession we are all predicting as we are coming out of the pandemic hopefully soon. Nevertheless, we will have to weather the storm. Our startup ecosystems all around the world will have to weather the storm of recessionary developments. They also need to entail the social shift towards digital and entrepreneurial lifestyles that certainly have been accelerated during the pandemic. From our perspective, the tech ecosystems produce a wealth of possibilities, enhancing growth, providing critical solutions in healthcare for climate change, where likely we will need to innovate ourselves out of the upcoming climate crisis. It is not going to be rules only. I strongly believe, and we strongly believe, that we also need to have the ingenuity of our entrepreneurs on board in order to avoid larger crises. At the same time, innovation ecosystems like our biological analogs need support to flourish and grow. Think about it. Great regulatory environments and developments like we've witnessed them in Seoul and in many other cities around the world. Access to a resource, true broad collaboration across an ecosystem, access to global mentorship networks. These are all key to a healthy innovation ecosystem. And we ought to protect those in the middle of the crisis we are in at the moment. Really pay attention and make sure all these wonderful mechanisms that are supporting us as entrepreneurs in our entrepreneurial ecosystems do survive and do prosper. Make no mistake, we've had a massive shakeup, not just to the global economy, but to the structure of all our lives. That's obvious. There will be winners and losers. We can see that in many sector developments and subsector developments already in startup ecosystems and clusters in many locations. And we believe that tough adjustments will happen. They will need to be made, and that seems quite obvious to us. Some business models will no longer be viable, but there's always an upside to crisis. This crisis has also shown us that systemic change is possible. Changes that once seemed impossible, either because of politics, inertia, not invented here syndrome, now look possible in a matter of weeks. I talked to a VC partner, friend of ours in Manila last week, and he told me he has seen more progress in the last 5 months when it comes to e-health, health tech, e-commerce, and fintech. In the last 5 months, more progress than over the last 5-year period, where he was hoping to see much faster progress. So this gives us ideas of how fast change really can happen. We believe this disruption is not to be feared, it's to be embraced. It's an opportunity. Every year we release the Global Startup Ecosystem Report, GSER, as the authoritative report on our tech economy. And this year we had to tell it's the tale of two stories, one of success and one of unprecedented challenge. And we should be looking at the successes first. So prior to the pandemic, where did we stand and what did we see? The global startup economy, as we measure it and report it in our GSER, the Global Startup Ecosystem Report, remains large, creating nearly 3 trillion in value. And that's a figure which is comparable to the GDP of a whole G7 economy. In 2019 alone, in our data, we recorded about 300 billion in venture capital investment all around the world going into startup ecosystems. So these are incredible numbers, and it's certainly a most upbeat message we have to send. When we look at the largest companies today, 5 out of the largest companies in the world, that's no surprise, you all know them, are in tech. And that's not counting the older tech juggernauts like Apple and Microsoft. It's the highest concentration of any industry sector among the top global companies. Never has the concentration in one sector been higher than what we are witnessing. as of now. Unfortunately, the value created by the global startup revolution is greatly concentrated, and it still remains concentrated. And a few other things in our ecosystems at the end of 2019 and prior to the pandemic have not been as well as we would hoped them to be. Value creation by ecosystems remains concentrated in the top 10 performing cities globally. At Startup Genome, and we've presented that many times, it is our mission to break down this concentration and give help many more cities, many more clusters in the world to access the value creation that comes out of entrepreneurship, the ingenuity of a startup ecosystem. But as of today, the top 10 cities are still holding quite a large grip on the value concentration. What else is there to say? Inclusion remains a fundamental challenge in tech ecosystems where we witness them, with only about 14.1% of founders being female, to give an example. And quoting Barack Obama a few years ago, if you leave half the team on the bench, how can you win? So these are things we ought to address. With all the success, all the value creation, these are issues we need to address in order to get even better. Tech ecosystems also continue to produce negative externalities, high rents in tech hubs, such as San Francisco. Here, where I'm sitting in London, they are pushing out traditional communities, creative communities. And also we have citizens, society increasingly worrying about the impact, particularly of deep tech in regards to their role in life, their job opportunities in the future, where AI and robotics are possibly limiting or changing the possibilities. So these are very valid concerns, which we as ecosystem leaders and entrepreneurs involved in the ecosystems really need to address and have an open debate about. Where are we today in our GSE era? Already last year, we predicted that in the future there will be no new Silicon Valley, but instead there will be at least 30 global centers of entrepreneurship. And we hope there are many more of that size and nature. Regional clusters, Sao Paulo in South America, large population, or Jakarta in Indonesia, large population again. A lot of B2C businesses. These are the ones we believe stand a very good chance to be a part of the 30 global centers. Subsector leaders in robotics, in AMR, in AI, and cyber, certainly where Seoul is playing, where Korea is playing. But there are also very small places in the world. One of our clients sits in Denmark, a very small town you may never have heard about, but it is the world market leader in collaborative robotics. And these are extraordinary success stories. We believe the continued rise of deep tech is only going to accelerate this trend, and it's going to help us find more of these interesting centers in the world that are highly specialized and really capitalizing on deep tech and their prowess in research and R&D. Looking at Asia, Asia clearly is benefiting and doing a great job in producing more top ecosystems. 20% in 2012, you can see it on the slides. 30% of the top ecosystems already today are located in the wider Asia region. And I'm pleased to say that our current global ranking, GSER 2020, confirms Seoul establishing itself very highly, both regionally but also globally, highly competitive. And Seoul and Tokyo have firmly broken into the top 30 global startup ecosystems. And from my perspective, that's not the least based on their incredible strength in research and development. R&D powerhouses entering the rise of deep tech, helping to enter these top echelons of the startup ecosystems. We predict in our scenario models, which we've developed for the municipality of Seoul to have a great opportunity to rise into the top 10 ecosystems by 2025, provided the right actions are being taken. I think that's an incredible success if you can see that and can talk about it in only 4 years' time. I spoke about a tale of two stories. The first one is to the end of 2019. The next one is COVID-19 hitting the world. And we all certainly did not expect a major threat out of COVID-19 to global ecosystems. Since the crisis hit, startups are facing a double whammy, as we call it. Big drop in demand. You're not selling anymore. At the same time as VC investment is dropping, leading to a crunch for capital. We've been tracking the development in China, which was a leading indicator for us as the crisis hit there first, and the developments have been quite stark. We've been tracking it since all across the world. Looking into the future, typically venture capital dries up over time. when you look into the last recession we had in 2009-10, the real impact on VC only happened about 12 months after the peak of the crisis. So there's quite a bit to come. We are not out of the woods, and that's an important message to keep in mind. Layoffs among startups are paramount. Just over a third of startups in our COVID-19 research globally are not laying off staff, and others are doing it quite considerably, which is scary on the one hand side. It might provide opportunities for others who are very agile, very quick off the block, in order to attract this top talent that now is looking for new opportunities. Why is this so important? Why are we making these points so clearly? We believe that startups are incredibly effective to get us out of economic crisis. And Mr. Draper already was alluding to the fact how important the startup ecosystem is to rejuvenate our economy. At being Startup Genome, we thought to quantify the impact of good policy on job protection during crisis. We did it very simply. We just juxtaposed the prevalent measures that most governments, including the one where I'm sitting here in the UK, are taking in order to save SMEs, traditional small and medium enterprises, with the costs for tech startups. And our conclusion here remains very clear. Saving a job in a startup is on average 40% cheaper than in a traditional SME. It's incredible. Some governments, our friends in Tel Aviv, whom we are in very, very close contact, are developing highly interesting investment models. And they strongly believe saving jobs in the startup ecosystem can be a net positive investment if you just have enough time, if you think in a 5, 6, or 8 year perspective. The models are hugely encouraging and really worth looking at. Tech, and this point I also want to make by going back to the 2009-10 financial crisis. Tech was the engine of the last recovery. I personally witnessed the rise of tech in my hometown, the city of London, post 2019. When I look back, or when I look at the city today, it is by far more balanced and by far more reliant than it ever was when it was just building on its traditional strengths in traditional financial services. Globally, tech proved to be the driver of job creation post 2009. You can see it here on our slides. And it is a factor that we really ought to replicate now, to innovate ourselves out of economic and job crisis, and to provide the opportunities for our young and our next generations. So we strongly believe that startup entrepreneurship is the way out of crisis. We need to innovate ourselves out of economic crisis. That's very obvious to us. Looking a little bit deeper into what is really driving growth, what are the innovative business models? We first had a look at traditional R&D and looked at economic performance, and we found an interesting pattern. And we asked ourselves, where are our future opportunities to be found? Did economic analysis. And there's a clear trend globally. It's those cities, it's those economies that are betting on deep tech, and those that are able to combine their traditional R&D with dynamic startup ecosystems. We call them ambidextrous, two-handed, dual-handed, where traditional and future talent works hand in hand. It's really important to us. And Seoul is one of these places which we believe has nearly unprecedented potential. Korea and Seoul have been the leaders in R&D, technical R&D, and academic patents and citations for many, many years in global rankings. Here's the large opportunity to build this ambidextrous ecosystem where startup entrepreneurs, being nimble, being innovative in creating business models, have this great and fantastic opportunity we see in deep tech. High growth, speaking about deep tech, high growth sectors globally, the data we are showing here are global trends. Yeah, undoubtedly, and it will not surprise you, the rise of AI, of AMR, advanced manufacturing and robotics, and big data. That is evident. Blockchain finds its application in all shapes of businesses and life, way beyond cryptocurrencies, which Mr. Draper was speaking about, in supply chains, intelligent supply chains, smart contracts, etc. We're building incredible business models. Cybersecurity underpins our ever increasing use of digital services, but we all see it here. Even our children are on Zoom to see the classroom, and cybersecurity is the very underpinning. We also find it interesting to see how sectors we thought to be on the decline have had a second breath of life during and post the crisis. Think digital media, gaming, education technology. These are the winners of the current situation. E-commerce at an all-time high, and the valuations of Amazon and Bezos himself speak a clear language. And I think, let's make no mistakes, once our consumers, our clients have changed habits, these changes likely are here to stay. Humankind is sometimes lazy. Once something is working effectively, you adopt the habit. So these things are certainly to stay, and they show us the trends we ought to be working with. Again, in Seoul, we believe you are superbly positioned to benefit from these trends. I remarked on the R&D capability, the incredible knowledge that sits in AMR, in telecommunications, but in other industries. But it also sits in sectors such as gaming and the incredible creativity that Korea has in Seoul. So if these come together and this ambidextrous ecosystem really develops, we are very confident you will see the growth you've all witnessed for the last 10 years. You will see that accelerate and really be one of these top global players we so much like to report on in our global ranking. So building further out the ambidextrous ecosystem, capitalizing on the ingenuity and creativity of tech ecosystems, you stand the best chances to economically recover and to manifest yourself as leaders as a leading ecosystem in the world. On behalf of the entire Startup Genome team, our founder, JF Gauthier, myself, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to join you today and wish you an inspiring conference. Again, I regret not being with you today, and I sincerely hope that in January or February of 2021, the world is a place where we can travel again, shake hands, and have our personal discussions. Thank you very much indeed.